Welcome back to a special edition of Power Play Live in Banff. This is where the G7 summit is happening. What you just heard took place today against the backdrop of this summit all the way over in Boston. That is where a whole bunch of Canadian premiers are engaging with American governors on the issue of tariffs and the damage that those tariffs are really kind of ensuing on both economies in both the U.S. and Canada. We had the chance to speak with New Brunswick's Premier Susan Holt as those meetings came to a conclusion. Have a listen to our conversation. Hi, Premier Holt. Thank you so much for making the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be with you, Vashi.
I know you're in Boston. We're in Banff right now, kind of close to Canada-U.S, where the president and the prime minister met earlier today. The president was saying that he believes a deal with Canada on trade is, quote, achievable. Is that your sense?
Well, that's certainly what the group here in Massachusetts is hoping for, is that a deal can get done that will see us arrive at the free, fair, and open trade that has long defined our two countries.
When you are having those discussions there, and in particular when you hear President Trump say that he is a tariff man, is there a certain level of tariff that if it remained you would find acceptable, or would you like to see them all taken off?
Oh, we'd like to see them all taken off. At the end of the day, a tariff is a tax, and it's a tax on both Americans and Canadians right now. And we heard that loud and clear from the governors here in the New England states that are seeing the cost of this to, well, particularly tourism. They talked about today, the hit that U.S. tourism is taking, maybe less from the tariffs and more from the rhetoric, but then specifically craft brewers and aluminum companies and auto companies that have been affected and more. So we don't think any level of tariff is a good thing. And so the more we can get rid of, the better, including softwood lumber.
Is there a level, though, that, as premier of a province that does depend on trade quite significantly with the United States, you would be able to live with? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. Essentially, everything that I've heard from people who are involved in these negotiations is that is the sticking point, that essentially, as I said, Donald Trump described himself as a tariff man today. It doesn't appear like it will go to zero. So now there's a discussion going on about basically what this country can live with. As the Premier of New Brunswick, what can you live with?
Oh, well, look, I mean, the lower, the better. We have companies that are trying to find a path through the current softwood lumber and aluminum and steel and auto tariffs, but it's having an impact on businesses here and businesses in the U.S. And so the lower they can be, the better. But we'll certainly take a reduction, but they really should be zero, because it's a tax. It's a tax on businesses and on their employees, and it's not good for either the U.S. economy or the New Brunswick economy.
And what is your sense in the conversations you're having with, in particular, Democratic governors who are there, about whether or not, that economic impact that you're describing is actually being felt with Americans or by Americans, or whether they anticipate it'll take a bit longer for that to permeate?
Well, that was definitely part of the conversation this morning, along with there's a couple Republican governors who are here as well, from Vermont and from representative from New Hampshire, talking about, a 60% drop in bookings at their state park, 36% decrease in Canadian credit card charges in their hotels and restaurant and retail sector in New York. This is money that Americans aren't getting from Canadians right now, and that's hurting. It's costing jobs. We heard the same from microbreweries all along the Eastern Seaboard that are having to pay more for cans, and in some cases can't. So we're seeing the negative job impacts, and I don't know that Americans are feeling this unless you're that craft brewer or you're that person who's got a job in the tourism sector at Old Orchard Beach for the summer, and now you've lost your job or didn't get hired on because the volume isn't there, because Canadians aren't doing business with the U.S. the same way we used to. So it's having a negative impact. We hope that more and more Americans are realizing that these tariffs are a tax on them, and they should express that to their leadership. And we're asking the governors, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, to speak up and stand up for their citizens and their economy.
You mentioned Premier Republicans who are there, one governor, and then you said a representative from New Hampshire. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the governor of New Hampshire is a supporter of President Trump and did not sign a letter, for example, that all the other governors did, asking for the premiers to attend. If by and large you are talking mostly with Democrats, how effective do you think these conversations actually will be in changing the fact that these tariffs are in place?
Yeah, it's a great question, Vashi. We're all trying to find the ways to get through to the people who are making the decisions, the fact that this is hurting the American economy. And so, many of these governors represent people who didn't vote Democrat or who have split houses or otherwise. But they're also talking with the CEOs. Actually, I've just stepped away from a luncheon with CEOs from the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, with Massport and others, talking about the business impacts that CEOs are expressing to the White House. And so we need every voice to make clear how this is hurting jobs, how it's hurting the U.S. economy, and why the tariffs need to go.
Ultimately, though, there are other CEOs like Mary Barra with GM who are supportive of the tariffs. Once again, the one governor there who supports Donald Trump, who could get that message to him, didn't come to the meeting. Ultimately, do you think there's any way to get Trump off those tariffs?
Well, it's a good question. Certainly the governor of Vermont as a Republican, and I was with the governor of Georgia actually last week as the southeastern U.S. states were up in St. John, New Brunswick, are also suggesting that figuring out how to change Trump's mind is something they're all still working on. So that's why we're looking for Americans who might see themselves losing their jobs because their auto parts job has disappeared, or their aluminum can making job has disappeared, or their tourism job has disappeared, to realize that that's because of the president's tax and tariffs, and we would encourage them to speak up against it.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Safe travels, Premier Holt. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Vashi.